Okay. Right. Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. And as Marcia said, welcome to the Caribbean Regional Midwives Association webinar. Um, I know we took a little hiatus last month, gave you a little breather. You know, sometimes you go through, you call that Zoom fatigue. But we are back. Um, we this month want to present something on adolescent health. I know we have done adolescent health before, but you can always find topics as it relates to adolescent health when you're talking about reproductive health. So tonight we hope that you will enjoy the session, that you will be interactive, as the speaker wants an interactive session. And we hope that the information utilized will help you to transform the care given to adolescents in the various countries. I was trying to write as we started, and we have participants so far from Dominica, the British Virgin Islands, St. Lucia, Guyana, um, the Bahamas, the various islands of the Bahamas. I see Cat Island, I see Freeport, I see Nassau, New Providence. So I'm pleased, if you haven't already done so, put your countries in the chat, and we say welcome to you. And we hope that the session is one that elevates your knowledge and increase your practice. Thank you. Back over to you, Marcia.
All right. Thank you, Shirley. And so I want to introduce our presenter for tonight, Ms. Ava Rampasad. And Ava is the Executive Director of the Family Planning Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And we must say congratulations, because I think that's a fairly new position. She was born into a family of strong matriarchs and is the mother of a lively 8-year-old girl. She is a first-generation college graduate holding a Master of Public Health with merit postgraduate degree from the University of Roehampton, London, a BA with honors in marketing and management from Angela Ruskin University, London, and a diploma in human resource management from the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies in Trinidad. Actively involved in community work, supporting vulnerable members of society since the age of 16, Ava represented Trinidad and Tobago and Canada in the 15th, correct, and 17th International AIDS Conferences held in 2004 and 2005, respectively. In 2007, she was nominated for a National Youth Award for Community Excellence. She later co-authored what became one of the most successful national HIV/AIDS campaign in Trinidad and Tobago, WYP, and I think all of us remember that. What's your position? She was also a presenter at the 18th International AIDS Conference in Vienna in 2010 and served on the executive of the Trinidad Youth Council. In 2007, Ava joined the global social marketing powerhouse, Population Services International, as we know, PSI, where she managed the design, development, and execution of health impact program research, targeted information, education, communication materials, the construction and evaluation of peer education training curricula, and the hands-on management of behavior change communication, peer educators across 9 curricula. She also worked with 5 militaries within the Caribbean in hands-on HIV health programs. After PSI in 2017, Ava joined the Family Planning Association of Trinidad and Tobago where she began coordinating the association's HIV treatment as prevention initiative, focusing on key populations and the client's peer navigation team, which provided service to economically challenged communities across the country. In 2021, after a rigorous selection process, she was unanimously supported by Family Planning Association's board for promotion to the position of executive director. She was appointed to the position in September 1st, 2021. With over 20 years experience in public health and community enrichment programming, she continues to grow and add value to the humanitarian sector. So it is with great pleasure we welcome Eva Rampersad to our platform tonight to lead us in adolescent, sexual, and reproductive health. Over to you, Eva.
Thank you very, very, very much. And I must say that, so let me just take off my glasses because I realized there is a glare. And people tell me I look unapproachable sometimes when I wear my glasses. So I remember receiving the invitation for this last week, and I was like, oh my goodness, my schedule is so packed. But given the opportunity, looking at what your organization represents and knowing the very close relationship that family planning has played with your organization for many, many years, it was something that I could not say no to. And I remember working with Marcia even over the weekend to firm up details and so on, because I really feel like if this is such an important topic, it is something that I'm very passionate about. And looking at the room with 174 people and it's constantly growing, I definitely think that you are also passionate, because after a very long day, you choose to be here. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being here. Whether or not your attention is split and you're doing something at home, or you're still at work, or you're studying, or you're off on a couch somewhere, thank you for being here, because you could have chosen otherwise. And I do hope to make the next just shy of 2 hours very engaging for you. But recognizing that that there is a time that we talk about after you eat, there is an itis that you experience. I firmly believe that there is a point in time in the evening, there's a different kind of itis that takes place. So in order to combat that particular itis, I want to ensure that we're as engaging as possible. We are dealing with a very sensitive topic. We are dealing with a topic where there continues to be opinions on different sides of the spectrums. We continue to deal with a topic where policy-wise and in the context of legislation, we're not quite there. So as we begin, I want us to be as open as possible, because that's where learning begins. That's where learning takes place. And I want us to also respect each other's opinions. And let us be open to sharing. This is our space to share. So thank you for having me. So I'm hoping that a few people can at least open up their cameras, because even though we're virtual, we're all beautiful people across the Caribbean. Listen, the Caribbean has some of the most beautiful people in the world. Huh? So as we begin, oh gosh, thank you, Willette. Thank you so much. And I hope to see others doing the same. So as we begin, I want us to do a little brief exercise just to get our excitement going a little bit. All right. So there are two things I want to do. I want to start with the chat box. So I want you to open up your chats and I want you to describe your day with emojis. So however your day was to you, describe it with emojis in the chat box. Oh my goodness. Yes, Latoya. Ay, Linda, that's pretty cool. Shonda, Yolanda, and Latoya, I think we need to meet up for some drinks. Wonderful. We have people studying as well. Uh-oh, someone's sick and tired, and you still chose to be here. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Somebody seems to be kooky. Lovely, lovely. Wonderful. That's actually great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. Welcome, Turks and Caicos. Oh, a number of people are under the weather, it seems. And some people are probably dealing with others who are under the weather. Well, that's our field, right? Rachel, you have been laughing all day. I hope that you can share some of those jokes. Letitia, was something on fire? Or is it that your day was on fire? Wonderful. All right. So next exercise, I want you to picture your closet. And I want you to picture what's your favorite outfit in that closet. All right. Picture it, see the color. Remember the texture of it. Is it one piece? Is it two pieces? Is it a combination? And I want you to describe that outfit in 1 to 3 adjectives, and you could put it in the chat. Describe that outfit in 1 to 3 adjectives. It could be you know, I was waiting on this. Right? Describe your outfit in 1 to 3 adjectives, your favorite outfit. I see we have sexy. I see we have seductive, red, sexy, short, flirty, revealing, neat, elegant, beautiful, hugging, colorful, comfortable. What else do we have? Fabulous, classy, black, short, and sexy. I'm going to say that sound like a Caribbean partner, but all right. Exotic, elegant, body on fitting, long red hugging, flirty, luxurious, royal blue hugging, cute, warm, cool, sexy, stunning, red and hot. Again, that sounds like a Caribbean partner. Lovely. Elegant, smooth, and gorgeous. Are you all sure you are describing outfits here? Wonderful. Thank you so much. Comfortable, classy, eye-catching, pink, and sassy. Okay, I read something different first. Good thing I make sure and I check it back in my mind first. Breathtaking. Chic. Assertive and demanding. Ay, ay, ay. Well, I tell you, all your sure is the outfit all you're describing? Now, I love that. I love the adjectives. Thank you so much for taking part in that little exercise. And I hope that, you know, you get a little bit of blood moving. I had a little smile. Now, one of the things as we go into the session, so there would be 4 areas that we would be sharing and exploring tonight. We would be exploring adolescent reproductive health rights. We would be discussing the factors that facilitate access to sexual and reproductive health services by adolescents. We will discuss the barriers that hinder adolescents' access to sexual and reproductive health services. And we will explore the way forward for improved access to sexual and reproductive health services for adolescents in the Caribbean. Now, each of these topics can easily be a webinar in and of itself. And so what we're going to do, we're going to brainstorm through these sessions because we want to get your juices moving. All right. And I do hope that depending on where we are into different areas, it can stimulate thoughts for the Caribbean Regional Midwives Association to think about other webinars that may excite you as you move forward. So first things first, when we think about adolescent reproductive health rights, there are a few concepts that come to mind. We can come up with adolescent reproductive health. We think about different terms and concepts in there. Can anyone, if you can just open your mic and or your camera, you don't have to turn on your camera if you don't feel comfortable, but open up your mic and tell me, when you hear the term adolescent, what do you think about? I'm not asking what you learned as a definition in school. I want to know what you think and feel when you hear the term adolescent. So if you had to come up with your own definition of adolescent, what would that be?
If you can raise your hand so that we can do this in an orderly manner, so don't all speak at once. Unmute your
And please,
mic.
there's no right or wrong answer. This is a space of sharing. It's a safe space.
Exactly. Griffin, Eureka. Unmute your mic, Eureka.
She's unmuted, but we're not hearing her.
Hello,
Yes,
Right,
go
yeah,
ahead.
can you hear me?
Yes, we
we
are.
can.
Okay, I'm responding to the question about who is an adolescent. An
Mhm.
adolescent is an individual, well, male or female, who has transitioned from puberty, the pubertal stage, but has not yet attained full adulthood. So it's the period between puberty and adulthood. That person, there's an adolescent.
Thank you, Eureka. And
You're
I see
welcome.
that Carlene has also inserted in the chat on becoming an adult. Anybody else, when you hear the term adolescent, what's your definition for adolescent? Not necessarily the textbook definition that we learn in webinars and school. What's your definition? I see Nikisha.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
When I think of adolescent, I think of a young person who is a bit ambivalent, a bit confused, those seeking information, but not necessarily able to make the best decisions yet.
Okay.
So those are some of the things that come to my mind when I think of an adolescent.
Thank you, Nikisha. Diana?
I think about, good night, everyone. I think about when I hear the term, persons who need support, need help, who need guidance because they themselves are trying to understand themselves. So they need support and guidance. That's my
Thank you,
take
Diana.
home when I hear the term.
Linda?
Yes, I'm thinking, good night, everyone. I'm thinking a young individual smack in the middle of a process of self-understanding, learning what they're feeling, understanding the raging hormones and the external environment as they react to it. Someone who is missing a little bit of being a child, expected to act older, but not quite ready for adulthood.
All right, thank you so much. And just to go back into the chat, I'm seeing a teenager in a state of mental confusion, a challenging period for a young person. Simply put, I think of teenagers going through changes, transitional period, transitioning from childhood to adulthood. A young person who is curious and searching for answers. A young person who is in transition of becoming an adult needing guidance. Advancing from puberty to adulthood. These are young persons who are vulnerable. They are neither fish nor fowl. Exploring teenagers not yet 18 years old. A young person in the process of developing from child to adulthood. So one of the things that we quickly notice is that when we talk about adolescent, we identify that they are younger individuals. And one of the things that keep coming up is that we talk about needing guidance or support. And I like that word support. And I think that that's something that I think we should hold on to as we go through this webinar through tonight, needing support. And support comes in many different ways. And also there is a word that keeps coming up, transitioning, and that's an important one. And I think when we think about the textbook definition of adolescent, the World Health Organization in particular identifies adolescent as a period in human growth and development that occurs after childhood and before adulthood, from ages 10 to 19. And at this point, I want you to go back For some of you, way back into time, when you were 10 to 19 years old. Bring back those memories for me as we're at that point. It represents one of the critical transitions in the lifespan of individuals and is characterized by a tremendous pace in growth and change that is second only to the stage of infancy. Let me read that part again. It is characterized by a tremendous pace in growth and change that is second only to that of infancy. So I want you to think back on your life at 10 to 19. Norma, I want you to think back when you were 13. Kathleen Albert, I want you to think back when you were 15. Christy Pratt, I want you to think back when you were 16. Jade Bando, I want you to think back when you were 12. Sandra, I want you to think back somewhere when you were 18. Nasiba Mohammed, I want you to think back when you were like 19. Think about those ages. And I want you to think about your human rights that you are aware of now. And I want you to tell me, at the age of 10 to 19, what were some of the rights that you think you were afforded or should have been afforded? Anybody willing to go first? Yes, Eureka? You're muted, Eureka.
I think at that time, well, I had to go way back, way back. My rights, as I remember, was my right to reach home before 6 p.m.
That was a right or a responsibility?
A right and a responsibility. Well, a responsibility, yes.
Okay. But what was some of the rights that you felt as you, based on the knowledge that you have now? Yes,
the
Camille.
right I had to do well at school. That was pounded in my head all the time. You've
So again,
got to
is that
do
a
well
right
at school.
or responsibility?
Yeah, responsibility.
Okay.
Yes, Camille.
Okay, well, one of the rights that we should most times should have been afforded, but we're not, was the right to be heard, because we're always told we should be seen and not heard.
The right to be heard. Very powerful, Camille. Thank you. Mindy.
Hi, good night, everyone. I think growing up, usually your parents would tell you when they talk to you, they didn't expect you to have an opinion. And I think having that opinion in terms of having that discussion, that interaction where they can discuss matters and not just being told what they expect of you is something that I think I should have been afforded. Yeah.
Having an opinion. Very powerful. So we hear being heard, we hear having an opinion. Anybody else? What were some of the rights that you think you were afforded, that you should have been afforded? Think back to your 10 to 19-year-old self. Petronella, think about when you were that age, you know, the trends that you were into. What was some that you should have been afforded? I see Shannon.
Yes, good evening. To be a little more involved in decisions that were concerning you, because you know they would just decide whatever it is for you, and then you had no say in the decision.
Beautiful, having a say in decision making. And that's very powerful, huh? And it ties right back into what was shared earlier about being heard and having an opinion. Anybody else? Last one? Oh, I think there's
in the chat. Privacy.
Education, privacy, food, shelter, clothing, privacy, the right to participate in decisions that affect you, the right to gender equality. I always felt the imbalance between our male counterparts. The right to explore relationships and boys. And I'll come back to that. I love that part there, and I'll come back to it. Oh yes, and I see Kathy Ann and Rosalind. I'll take you too, and then we can continue. Kathy Ann?
You didn't have a right to choose. So it was a case of what they wanted you to be and not necessarily what you wanted to be. So choice of professional pathways were selected for you at that point in time, you know. So it sort of stymied your individuality to a point.
Okay,
So that was some of the things.
very powerful. Thank you, Kathy and Roslyn.
Yes, good night, everyone. I think that at that stage, I would have liked the right to interact more with your peers, not only in school, but in other after school curricular activities. But at that time, you were told if it had boys there, you're not going. Anytime it's something that have boys around, as a young girl, you stay home. And I think that would have helped more in being able to communicate and know how to set boundaries for persons at that age. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So I want you to think about something now. So I'm not going to ask you to answer yet. Those were some of the rights that you felt at that age, 10 to 19, that you felt that you had the right to, right? Now, I want you to think about a 10 to 19-year-old today that you know of. It could be a child, it could be a niece, a nephew, it could be a neighbor, it could be a friend's child. Some 10 to 19-year-old, I'm sure all of us at least knows one 10 to 19-year-old. And you tell me, based on all of the rights that you felt that you should have been afforded when you were 10 to 19, do you think that that 10 to 19-year-old today, do you think that that individual has that right or has the privilege of that right? Don't answer. Hold on to it. Don't answer yet. All right. Now, when we think about adolescent reproductive health rights, there are a few documents that we need to be aware of. There are a few publications, and the publications are also updated from time to time. And there are two in particular that I want to point out this afternoon. Have you ever heard of ICPD? ICPD, specifically 1994. So the most common term you would hear is ICPD 1994. Anybody? If you've heard it, you could just show by a raise of hand. You could, or what is it? I think on the emoji, it's a thumbs up. Okay, so, right. So if you've ever heard of it, you could put a thumbs up. If not, you could put a thumbs down on the reactions. Anyone? ICPD 1994. Okay, so far I see two people. Okay, so most people have so far have not heard. All right. So ICPD is the International Conference on Population Development. It's a conference that is held, I think it's every year. And the one specifically that we're talking about is the one that was held in 1994 in Egypt, Cairo. When I just got into my journey on sexual and reproductive health, this was one of the first publications that I learned about. And I used to be talking about ICPD 1994. I learned that term like the back of my hand, because for me as a young person back then, it was one of the decisions that as governments, that there was a decision that really placed the opinions and the voices of young people to the forefront. So the International Conference on Population Development in 1994, which was held in Egypt, in Cairo, Egypt, they actually came up with some specific objectives. And in the context of adolescence, they made a commitment, which many of our governments that we allude to tonight in the Caribbean signed on to, including Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, I'm calling them out. So including the government of Trinidad and Tobago and many of the other Caribbean governments signed on and committed to these specific objectives. And what the ICPD specific to adolescents spoke to is to address adolescent sexual and reproductive health issues, including unwanted pregnancy, unsafe abortion, and sexually transmitted infections, including HIV and AIDS, through the promotion of responsible and healthy reproductive and sexual behavior, including voluntary abstinence, consistent and correct use of condoms, and the provision of appropriate services and counseling specifically suitable for that age group. That's the commitment of ICPD 1994. Let me say it again. Specifically to adolescents, our governments committed to address adolescent sexual and reproductive health issues, including unwanted pregnancies, unsafe abortion, and sexually transmitted infections, including HIV and AIDS, through the promotion of responsible and healthy reproductive and sexual behavior, including voluntary abstinence, consistent and correct use of condoms, and the provision of appropriate services and counseling specifically suitable for that age group. And that is what the main thrust, when we think about reproductive health and adolescents, and we think about ICPD 1994, it is that specific clause that we are referring to. And it's a very important one, because what happens in these population development conferences, our governments are held accountable. And when they are held accountable, they need to report. And when they need to report on the progress against these commitments. And how they report, it's basically the performance within the public health sector, public health system in particular. There is some inclusion of civil society as well. So they do reach out to civil society organizations to find out about programs and what they're doing. And then the government compiles all of this to present a report on. So it follows that for most of our governments, they have signed on to ICPD 1994. So the right of adolescents in sexual and reproductive health, it is a right and it is a responsibility. So that's why I'm glad that Eureka brought up some of the examples, because rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. Yes, Eureka, that's exactly it. Rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. So our young people, they do have a right to exercise and access this based on ICPD 1994. And our government, by signing on to this commitment, has a responsibility to ensure an enabling environment that affords these areas. Now, in addition to ICPD 1994, have you ever heard of Montevideo Consensus? So similarly, if you've heard about it, you could use your reaction and do a thumbs up. If you've never heard about it, you can use the thumbs down. Have you ever heard of Montevideo Consensus? Anybody? Montevideo Consensus. Have you ever heard of the Montevideo Consensus? Oh, wow. So a lot of people are also saying no as well. Okay. And that's okay. That's why we're here, right? So the Montevideo Consensus was adopted by governments of the Latin American Caribbean region in 2013. So this is, in the grand scheme of things, just shy of 10 years. And it includes more than 100 priority actions covering themes including population policy and planning, children and youth, aging, sexual and reproductive health, gender equality, international migration, territorial inequality, and the list goes on. So that's the Montevideo Consensus, and it was adopted in 2013. And yes, many of our own governments, just like the ICPD 1994, many of our governments signed on to the Montevideo Consensus. As a matter of fact, in the last review, so every 2 years, there's a periodic review, and similarly to ICPD, where the government has to account, very similarly for the Montevideo Consensus, our country has to report on the progress that they've made based on the commitments that they've given to with the Montevideo Consensus. In the last periodic review, I was actually on the team that was reviewing some of the reported progress and gaps. So I know for sure that there is a mechanism of accountability. Now, the Montevideo Consensus, countries agreed to provide comprehensive sexual and reproductive health programs. Doesn't that feel like the proverbial unicorn? Comprehensive sexual and reproductive health programs prioritizing the prevention of teenage pregnancies and eliminating unsafe abortions. That was one area that the Montevideo Consensus specific to adolescents looked at. They also looked at to implement comprehensive, timely, and good quality sexual health and reproductive health programs for adolescents and young people, including youth-friendly sexual health and reproductive health services. So let me do that again. Implement comprehensive, timely, good quality sexual health and reproductive health programs for adolescents and young people, including youth-friendly sexual health and reproductive health services. So those two in particular, the ICPD 1994 and the Montevideo Consensus 2013, are two of the primary documents and publications and frameworks within which our governments are mandated to operate because they signed on and gave commitment to. And these speak directly to adolescent health. From a country perspective, in many of our countries, we do have national policies. So we do have a national policy on sexual and reproductive health. Many of our countries, in Trinidad and Tobago, there was one that was done in 2020. Are there any other countries with national sexual and reproductive health policies? Any other countries? Do you have a national sexual and reproductive health policy in your own country?
Yeah, we do.
Which country?
Trinidad.
Yes, so Trinidad is 2020. Any other country? What about Turks and Caicos, Dominica? Who else am I seeing on here? In terms of the, I'm just going back in the chat to see who's.
Said,
Bahamas,
somebody said
Dominica,
they think
Jamaica.
Jamaica has. They said they think Jamaica has.
Antigua, St. Kitts. I think Jamaica has. Okay. So it would be a really good starting point as well to identify whether or not your country has a national sexual and reproductive health policy, and whether or not adolescents and youth are included as focal populations in that policy. And if your country signed on to ICPD 1994 or the Montevideo Consensus 2013, it's important that those commitments are reflected in the policy as well, because they go hand in hand. Yeah. Now, are there any questions so far? Are we okay? How we feeling? Give me a show of hands from you using your emojis, how you feeling. So use your reaction and just give me an emoji, how you feeling so far. Okay, so I see one thumbs up. Anybody else? Let me just get a feel. Okay, I see an A, okay. Thumbs up and A, okay. Awesome. Okay, Rachel. Awesome, great. I like that. So we cooking. Sorry if you haven't had dinner yet and I said cooking. All right, so I know, so I want to shift the conversation a little bit more and I want to hear from you. So this is where I want to encourage you to open up your mics as well. And I want to go into some of the barriers that hinder access to adolescent sexual and reproductive health services. Because we just spoke about some of the frameworks and policies that exist within which adolescent sexual and reproductive health programmings should operate and be realized. But we all know there's a reason why we're here, right? So you tell me, based on your experience, what are some of the barriers? And this is a safe space. You don't need to pretty it up. Say it as it is, because that's the only way we would be able to move forward with it a little bit. So I invite you now to open up your mics and let's share. And I'd ask my lovely ladies to help me. So I see, okay, so one person said religion, culture and religion. Open up your mics, let's talk. Give me some examples. I see Carol, go ahead, Carol. Carol, I can hardly hear you.
And discrimination attached, especially if a young person would say that they are, a young female would say that they attracted to another female, then they will be stigmatized. So they'll be afraid to go out to tell the parents or even tell their friends because of the stigma that it will be attached.
Okay, so we're talking about stigma, particularly dealing with issues around sexual orientation. Thank you, Carol. That's a very important one. I am not sure if I'm going to say this correctly. Tisha, T-I-C-I-A. Go ahead.
Ticia.
Ticia.
Good
Okay, go
evening.
ahead,
So
Ticia.
stigma all around in terms of anything sexual coming from adolescents, as well as the attitudes and behaviors of clinicians. That's a major barrier.
The attitudes of clinicians. Thank you, Ticia. All right, we have Vesta.
Yes, I am looking at, there can be a situation of confidentiality, certainly in small areas. For example, I'm from Anguilla and it's very small where everyone knows each other. So even though you wanted to seek healthcare, you might be fearful that others might know. So confidentiality would be a big one.
Excellent. Thank you, Vesta.
Welcome.
Yasmin.
For me, I have found, just like Ticia, the attitudes of healthcare providers, we can be very judgmental. And sometimes it doesn't, we may not say it, but it shows on our faces. It shows on what we do with our eyes. We do not make them feel welcome, not even to feel comfortable, just to seek information. We make them feel that that is not their time. But when we make them feel like that is not their time, are we expecting them to get that information in adulthood? We are not creating that avenue for them to be empowered and for them to make better decisions as they ease into adulthood.
Thank you. So what I would also encourage you to do is, in addition to sharing what you feel are some of the barriers, can you also share perhaps an instance where you have seen or know of that barrier happening? So go ahead, Chanel.
Good evening. So I was going to say the same thing, fear of being judged, both on the adolescent side and for the parents of the adolescents when they're accessing the care. And then the law also is a barrier. So we have teenagers, they would sometimes not come with the parents to try to access care because they think they will get around it in terms of knowing some things would be reportable offenses. So we would have recently, some time back, we'd have had one person come in for family planning and she brought along a cousin. Now the cousin was, I think, 16 or 17. And we told her, well, okay, she would have to come back with the parents. And more than likely, that person not going to come back. Because after we sat, we talked to her, we had a nice chat with her. The reason she wanted to join family planning. And she had legitimate reasons. And even she said her parents knows about it, but they didn't want her to come. So she chose to come with another family member. So the judgment and that the laws are some of the barriers.
Okay. Yasmin and, oh, I'm sorry, Eureka first. I think Eureka was first. Go ahead, Eureka.
Yeah, but what I have recognized is that in the Caribbean, an adolescent still lives most times in their parents' home. Whereas in the developed countries, an adolescent is more or less on his or her own, living in their own apartment, making their own decisions. I know of many persons in foreign countries, as soon as they turn 18, 19, their parents will tell them, it is time for you to, to move out and be more responsible. And even if they do not move out of the home, they may occupy a downstairs or a part of the home that, they have that kind of autonomy of themselves. Whereas in the Caribbean, we still hold on to our adolescents. And there are many parents who still holds that ideal that if you are in my house, then you do as I say, all right? And many parents still hold on to that value system that an adolescent does not have that, right to, when you talk sex at all, you begin to talk a taboo subject. And so you find that access to it becomes difficult because if they're not yet over 18, they must have parental consent. Well, you're going to either demystify that this evening, whether or not they need to have parental consent at a particular age to access sexual and reproductive health. So you find that in the Caribbean culture, it is more difficult for the adolescent to navigate their sexual and reproductive health as opposed to the developed countries. It is changing a bit, but we are still holding on to some very traditional values.
Thank you, Eureka. Yasmin?
Just to give an example of what I mentioned earlier, after you asked, I remember I would do school visits and we would meet with Form 5s to discuss, because the school curriculum does not allow the teachers to talk about it. So they would invite us in to have these group talks with these Form 5s and Form 4s and Form 5s about safe sexual practices, STIs, and so on. And I was assigned to one particular area. I did the school visits and I sort of said, hey, I have an open door policy. Please feel free to come to me if you have any concerns, any issues, questions, anything. If it's just for information, you can just come. Let me know what's on your mind and so on. We're not talking about prescribing contraceptives or anything. It's for information. And I had several young people from a school nearby coming in almost daily in groups of 5 and 6 and so on. And I had one particular nurse with me that I said, I have a group of kids coming in. They normally come every day seeking information. And she said outright, I am not doing that. I'm not giving information. I'm not doing anything like that. They're children. And she refused She refused not even to find out what they were coming for, to say, okay, let me refer them to a place where I know where they can get the information. So if they came and I wasn't there, they would just turn around and leave. Suffice to say, during that period, we had instances, we had an issue with teenage pregnancies, and we were trying very hard to see how we can turn around the attitudes and perceptions and improve some of the behaviors. So that was my experience.
Thank you for sharing, Yasmin. And I'm sure we all have stories around young people's access to sexual and reproductive health services. And just reflecting on the chat, I see legislation is the biggest barrier as consent is needed for care for under 18. Clinic hours, and this one is a really big one as well. Clinic hours, adolescents are probably at school or work during regular clinic hours. And I think that also goes for adults as well. Clinician discomfort in discussing the topic, very, very important one. Low self-esteem, stigma needing parents' consent, society on a whole, judgmental attitude from adolescents, access to information, contraceptives and consent, family dynamics, age, knowledge and access, needing parental consent, stigma, and culture and religion. And all of these barriers are indeed very, very relevant, and they really do inhibit young people's access to sexual and reproductive health services. And we're in a state of a catch-22, right? So to answer Eureka's question, yes, and I know for sure for Trinidad and Tobago, the age of consent was changed to 18. So it means then that any person under the age of 18 needs to get parental consent because they cannot give consent. And that you would be required by law to report any suspected incidents that's happening. Now, in Trinidad and Tobago as well, the Sexual Offences Act, there was a gray area between 16 to 18. So while it wasn't necessarily explicit, there was a gray area between 16 and 18. So depending on the judge, if the matter did reach the courts, depending on the judge that you will come up in front of, you might either be lucky or you might actually end up in a monkey pants, as they say. But with the change in the law a few years ago, that became that ambiguity was cleared up, and now it is definitely the age of consent is 18 and older. Now, while on the one hand it protects our young people, our children and adolescents, it protects them from many other circumstances. For example, child marriage is a very big concern in the Caribbean, a lot more than we actually even realize. And it's also leading to things like reproductive coercion. And it is a big issue that we don't really talk about. So is someone trying to say something? Okay. So you are correct. The law does say 18. But what it's also, and while yes, it provides the basis to protect this particular vulnerable group, on the other hand, it is also creating harm. In each of our countries, there is a study that oftentimes that takes place in different schools. I think they do it, I think it's every 5 years. It's a school-based survey that is done. And from that school-based survey, one of the key areas that they point out is age of sexual debut. For Trinidad and Tobago, one of the last reports showed that the age of sexual debut of our young people, it's 9. Let's take that in for a minute. Now, I am not saying that I want us to promote sex among our 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds. But what I'm saying is that we need to ensure that, remember that word that we started off with, support, it has to be ever present. And I want to go back as well to when we spoke about the definition of adolescence. And there's a particular part of the definition from the World Health Organization that I mentioned when it said, it is characterized by a tremendous pace in growth and change that is second only to that of infancy. Now, I'll share some of my personal business right now, right? I will be 40 years old in December. And I am telling you, I am transitioning. There would be times my AC would be on, but my body says different. And that's just one. There would be times if I had a penis, it would have become a rod of erection at different points during the day. Now, that is my experience as I transition into this next phase. Now, when I think back, my time as an adolescent, I distinctly recall the age where I really, now for me, I identify as heterosexual, and that's my decision. I have friends who identify as same gender loving. So my example relates to me as my choice as hetero. And I remember seeing this fellow, and I tell you, cute. Oh my goodness. And I always had a thing for arms. And this boy always liked to wear these particular cuts of jerseys. And all I wanted to do was to feel this boy hand on me. And I really, now I've never had the experience at that age. I didn't, and I was very shy. And I distinctly remember wanting, and it's like every time I see him, my heart racing, right? Now, you tell me, let me get open now. Let me get honest. What was some of the first time you really start feeling, Marcy, I see you pull off the glasses now. So tell me, can you recall the first time that you've acknowledged that you wanted to explore what it was like to kiss somebody, to touch a hand? Sometimes it's not even that deep, it's to touch their hand, to feel that warmth of that finger coming close to you, and you start to feel your heart race, to be desired, to explore desirability. What were some of those age ranges? Do you remember? Anybody want to share? Maybe one or two? You don't have to get graphic. That's fine. We could keep it PG-13. We could keep it Marvel style. Definitely smiles and lips, standard 2. Okay. Smiles and lips, standard 2. Yes, Marcia?
Yeah, I remember when I was 9. Now I have 4 brothers, and so they of course have friends. And I remember I have 2 brothers before me and 2 brothers under me. And I remember at about age, my brother's friends would come. And you as a small person, they're talking, they don't want you around, but you want to see them when they come. So you want to sneak in and look to see, And as you talk, it brings back memories,
Yeah, it does. Thank you for sharing, Marcia. Suzanne?
Hello, good night, everyone.
Good night, Suzanne.
Well, strangely enough, I remember when that had happening to me. I was in secondary school, actually, and every time I would go down the corridor and I see this particular guy, he'd be coming forward. I just turned the other way and go straight back because I thought he could see everything in my face. He could actually see that I liked him or whatever. So I just turned back, go the other way every time. I wasn't that brave to say anything.
Very cute.
And I thought my mom and my grandmother and so would know immediately.
Very, very cute. Is it Jasmine? I don't know. Am I breaking up? I'm seeing a question. Is it just me? The presenter keeps breaking up and I keep getting kicked out. Am I breaking up? Are you hearing me clearly?
We're hearing you clearly.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be their internet. They might be
Yeah.
having some issues.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I see here 11 years, a little
red Spanish.
A little red Spanish caught my eyes. Okay, Mindy. All right. So what about, tell me this. And this is a safe space. What was the age you got your first kiss? Silence, boy. 16.
16. Ah.
Yes, Roslyn, 12, 14, 17, standard 2, 12, 13, 19. Feel like I'm calling lots of numbers. 15, 16, 14.
Yeah, I remember mine was around 13, 14.
13.
And went to a school sports. And before I reached home, the information was home that I kissed them.
I
So
hear
that is
that.
why after that, you're not going anywhere where it had boys around.
I hear you. So I see here, I was 11 years old and wrote a love letter to my crush. I was beaten by my mom when they found out. 11, 12, 23, 19. Yes, Mindy?
Hi again, everyone. I just want to share this experience. I had this, for me, kissing was very, very, very gross. And there was this boy who, not this boy, he was older than me by about 2 years. I was 16, he probably was about 18. And I was writing CXC at the time, and we met up, and he insisted that he should kiss me. I was like, no, no, no. He like begged me for like about, must be 3 hours. And I remember when it was that bad. And when I started, I was like, oh, I didn't want to stop. You know, it was that
intense.
Magical. It was, yes, for the first time. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you for sharing, Mindy. Right. Now, the point I'm getting at, right, is that even as we share, look at the discomfort that we all have with sharing the age or the experience. Now think about our own young people and what they are facing. Have we created the environment for them to feel comfortable to talk about wanting to explore or having this feeling, and what do I do with it? I remember being in school and having the nurses come to do the talks, right? And I remember a nurse talking about taking a cold shower. What happens to your breast nipple when you take a cold shower?
It becomes erect.
All right. We talk about saying no, and that young people should say no. But let's explore that a little bit. In the Caribbean context, and this is something that for me is at the core, or is partly at the core of the barriers. We talk about young people needing to say no. But when we're children, We learn from a very early age that no is a bad word. And let me put that into context. As children, and we're talking about 2, 3, 4, when you're now starting to talk and interact, right? And mommy or daddy says, pick up the juice box that fell on the ground, or go and do X, or bring X. And that child says no. What's the first thing that happens? What do we do to that child?
Fine.
Sorry?
They might get spanked.
Spank the child. And in true Caribbean context, you don't just spank us, as we call it, slap. You slap with rhythm. Who you telling no? Yeah? Who you telling no? And it goes to the who you telling no? You are not allowed to say no. When uncle and auntie comes to visit, or grandma or grandpa comes to visit, or some strange man or woman, and they turn around and say, go and give auntie or uncle a hug. And the child says, and the child is pulling back, I tell you, go and hug them. And you push the child to engage in a physical contact that they are not comfortable with. And if they don't do it, what do? We slap with rhythm again. So from very early on, we're teaching young people that no is a bad word and that we should give in when older people give us instructions. Now, why is that important to this? When we look at data and statistics, and we look, for example, at sexual debut among young people, in many instances, particularly for young girls, it's with an older man. Let that soak in a bit. Yeah. And when we talk about the capacity, the skill sets, when we talk about having the skill sets, saying no is a skill set. The ability to say no is a skill set. Think about our own relationships with our own partners. If our partner, whether it's a husband or a wife, a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and they say, hey, you could do X for me, how easy or difficult is it to say no? Our own parents, even at this age, when they ask or issue an instruction, how easy is it to say no? Or how difficult is it? So when we talk about, and many of the traditionalist approaches talk about abstinence and saying no. We are sexual beings by nature. And what we're trying to do is suppress for a time, because trust and believe, when you reach a particular age, the question changes from the statement changes to a question. So it moves from, I hope you ain't having sex or no, or you better not be having sex or no, or you better not be meeting that boy, or you better not be going on with that girl or no. It changes from a statement to a question. And the question then becomes, so when I get grandchildren? Now, why this is important is because of the interconnectivity of each of the stages in our lives, and what we're doing, the barriers that we're creating, even in the context of adolescent health. It's not just barriers within the stage of adolescent, it becomes lifelong barriers, because what essentially is happening is that we're dealing with a momentum. We're dealing with a momentum, a change from childhood into adolescent, into youth, into adulthood. And each of those stages are interconnected with each other. And what we do in one stage affects the other. So when we teach young people that no is a bad word from childhood, what do you think is going to happen when they get to this stage of adolescence and puberty? They are already going through a phase of challenging self-esteem, not being sure of who they are, how they feel. And in that time, it becomes very difficult. And now we're asking them to be assertive. So are we also creating the environment? When we talk about enabling environment, are we creating those barriers ourselves? When we talk about access and barriers to access. When we talk about, and I can't remember the person who shared, I can't remember the person who shared, but you're very correct. Even at the clinic level, the fact that a young person not only decides, look at this, huh? When somebody presents to your clinic, they don't just appear like abracadabra. They ponder on it, regardless if it's 30 seconds or 30 days. They ponder on it. Then they might tell somebody, they might tell a friend, I need you to go with me. And then they make a plan, because remember, they can't tell mommy or daddy. So they make a plan to get to that clinic. And they find a way to get to that clinic and turn up. And they ain't driving because they ain't old enough for license. So they take either a taxi or get a drop and find themselves at your space to act responsibly. And what do? We don't even acknowledge them. And that is our reality. So do we prefer to attend to them as a statistic, 9 months barefoot? Or do we prefer to provide them with the skill sets necessary to make more responsible decisions, beginning with information and following through with access? And I may not have all of the answers tonight. And some of these really requires you as a healthcare provider to understand the frame within which you are operating and to decide, what kind of healthcare provider do I want to be? And on that note, just let's take a little break there for a minute, because I know this one has been a little bit heavy. So I want you to just, if you're sitting, just lean back in your chair and just take a deep breath in and hold it, and then let it out through the mouth. One more again, in and hold it, and out through the mouth. Nice. So before we move on a little bit, realize I like to have fun, right? Now, we have a lot of Caribbean countries here, so I want to have a little competition. Let us assume that an international steering committee has been established. The International Steering Committee of Best Breakfast Ever. Yeah? So this International Committee of Best Breakfast Ever is going to declare a particular combination that makes up this meal called breakfast. And it would be known to all of mankind as the best breakfast ever. What is it? So what is the best breakfast ever? And kudos will go to the country as well. So if you want, you could share, you could talk and share, or you could put it in the chat. Boiled fish and Johnny cake. Okay. Which country?
Bahamas.
Bahamas, boiled fish and Johnny cake. Okay, does everybody agree with that? Do we agree with that?
Never.
All right, what's your vote? No, ackee and saltfish with roast breadfruit in Jamaica. Ackee and saltfish with fried dumpling and spinach. Anybody else agreeing with that? I see doubles Trinidad and Tobago. I 1000% agree with that, with slide pepper. We said no. Anybody else? Best breakfast ever. Pancake with egg and bacon. Johnny cake. Curry chicken. That's breakfast, curry chicken and fried dumpling. Interesting. Coconut bacon, saltfish. I see saltfish coming up. Is it, wait, when we say saltfish, is the same saltfish I thinking, right? I just want to make sure. Cocoa tea, bacon, saltfish. Oh yes, a good cocoa tea.
Yes to that one.
Yes to that one. Okay. Stew fish and yellow grits. Cocoa lumps, stew liver and dumpling and bush tea. I've seen fish a lot. So it seems as if fish seems to be the main thing. Coconut, bacon, smoked herring, sada roti, and any choker. A little mix of everything presented at the table. Ackee and corn pork and breadfruit or fried dumplings and chocolate tea. Roast bacon, saltfish. So I've seen a lot of saltfish. So it seemed like saltfish seems to be on the agenda. And some kind of bake. Doubles with medium pepper, shrimp and yellow grits. All right. So it seems to be that the International Steering Committee of Best Breakfast Ever seems to go with some sort of saltfish and anything else that would follow and a cup of cocoa tea. So that is our international breakfast, best breakfast ever. All right. Yes, I agree. Plantain. All right. So let me just get a pulse in the room. How we feeling? How we doing? One adjective or an emoji. If you want to use an emoji, just let me know how you're feeling. How we doing so far? Okay, I see a thumbs up. Thumbs up. Everybody okay so far? Awesome. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So let's go on. So we talked a bit about the barriers. Now, in some of the instances, there are a few challenges as well. So just to bring that part of the conversation a little bit to a close, is that in the Caribbean, sexual initiation is among the earliest in the world. In most countries, over 20% of persons aged 15 to 24 have had sexual intercourse before the age of 13. In that study that I referenced earlier, it wasn't just age of sexual debut, but you had instances, there was a reported number of sexual partners where even perhaps before 16, you had young people talking about having at least 3 sexual partners. And across the Caribbean, there would also be similar statistics, right? So part of our challenge is that initiation or sexual debut is the earliest in the world in the Caribbean. There is also evidence that young people are sexually active, engage in higher risk sexual behavior. Example, not using a method of contraception or having multiple sexual partners. Now, adolescents are more likely to resort to unsafe abortions, as well as adolescent girls who are victims of violence and sexual abuse or trafficking are particularly vulnerable to unplanned pregnancies and sexually transmitted infections. Inconsistencies between the law and policy with regard to adolescents' access to contraceptives exists, with an anomaly between the age of consent, 16 in most territories, and the age of access to services, which is 18 in most countries. Now, there is also the conservative political climate, which prevents the development of comprehensive sexuality education supported by youth-friendly services. And data is also lacking, or it's unreliable for many important indicators. And this lack of data inhibits our ability to provide measurable or evidence-based programming. So those are some of the major challenges when we think about barriers that hinder access to sexual and reproductive health services by adolescents. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are some important advances, and there are some important actions that we do take that actually facilitate access to sexual and reproductive health services. So you tell me, in your own experiences, and I'm just mindful of the time, so share it briefly. Can you tell me some of the factors in your own neck of the woods, and your own spaces that facilitate access to sexual and reproductive health services by adolescents? And I can go first. At the family planning of Trinidad and Tobago, we actually have a clinic that was designed by young people for young people. And that space, when you walk in, it doesn't look like a clinic. It looks like a living room. It's called the living room. So when you walk in, it looks like a living room with a, well, now because of COVID, we actually had to move out the couch, but there is a couch and a coffee table where they can sit and have conversations. And then the examination areas are very private and so on. And having a space to call their own actually facilitates the opportunity for engagement, for a place of information, all the way to follow-up treatments and care. And that for us allows us the opportunity to have an important relationship with young people. And that's one example from family planning of Trinidad and Tobago. In your own spaces, what are some of the factors that facilitate access to SRH services by adolescents in your neck of the woods? Anybody wants to go? Feel free to open up your mic.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase your question again, please? Thank you.
Okay, so in other words, what happens within your place of work or your areas that actually encourage or facilitate access to sexual and reproductive health services by young people? So we heard earlier from one midwife who spoke about actually being available and encouraging young people, come and see me at my clinic, and I'm located at this clinic. What are some of the factors that you are aware of that's happening within your own areas that is leading to or encouraging access to sexual and reproductive health services by adolescents, that's facilitating that?
Hi, good night. Are you hearing me?
Yes, Sharon, I am. Go ahead.
Sharon Alva Bishop here, district nurse RN midwife. Yeah. At my health center where I practice, we don't have, sorry to say, but we don't have that facility for the adolescents. We are from, yeah, so I think we need to probably bring about change and see how best we can engage them, you know, so moving forward. Yes.
All right. So let me phrase it differently. What do you think needs to happen? What do you think will encourage young people? What do you think will facilitate access by adolescents to take up sexual and reproductive health services? Yes, Natalie, go ahead. You have the mic.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Okay, so just as we have said earlier in the discussion, is that in the Caribbean, we are still influenced by a lot of factors, including religion, culture, so on and so forth. So you find that a lot of the time our adolescents won't just come into a health facility to access services, particularly family planning and so forth. But what I find happening in my space, there is nothing special that we do for adolescents, because I still think we're of the mindset where children are children and they should be in the space of children. Go and read Mills and Boone and whatever you do these days, but certain things you leave alone. But for me though, I find that good customer service, because when you find that persons come to the facility and good customer service is being offered, they encourage their colleagues, their friends, and you find that even adults encourage the young girls around them to come to the health center for to get access services, because when they find that the customer service is efficient and you're not discriminatory or so forth, those are some of the things says that each one tell one. So that is one of the things that I find working in my neck of the woods where persons actually come because they know that the customer service is of optimum. It's optimal. So I find that it is a by word. Each person encourage another to come to the clinic for their services. So sometime I will find that you will get I will get clients, young clients coming in their uniform for family planning services. And then what I do sometimes is that I don't allow them to come when there is a big clinic. I will give them dates when I know it is a smaller number of persons, or on a day when there is a mixed clinic, so nobody will know exactly what it is they are coming to clinic for. And days when they can come outside of their uniform, I will facilitate them. And there are times that I will meet them outside of the clinic setting so that I can provide a service for them, particularly family planning, without it have to be so broadcast in other words.
Thank you so much, Natalie. My fellow moderator, go ahead, and then I would go to the chat.
In the Bahamas, we have an adolescent health clinic. And even though it's named Adolescent Health Clinic, what it's used for basically is for female adolescents who are pregnant. And so that was the unfortunate part of it, is that it is not advertised or promoted as adolescent health, because all the services are there for adolescent health, but the usage of it more turned out to be for pregnant adolescents. So therefore, like, the male adolescent isn't getting the same services as the female adolescent. And I know we tend to focus in on the female, but when you say adolescent, that male adolescent needs just as much attention, or even more so, as you look at what is going on nowadays with all the violence and stuff, that they need just as much as attention as the female adolescent. And so I thought, in developing the adolescent clinics, I think we need to be more intentional about actually providing that safe space for the male as well as the female.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So let me just go to the chat really quick. So Lorraine spoke about it's important that a relationship is made by the nurse at the health center with the schools that they offer the school health program to. Be a part of the PTA, especially if you are parents, or be present at meetings and let parents know of your programs. Commence an adolescent health program out of that same school health program through the school guidance counselor. Thank you very much. And I think that that feeds into our next conversation of topic, where we talk about recommendations. So we also have another who said, we provide educational sessions at the health center, high schools, and youth center where we engage them in conversation. We have someone else who said, Donnell, who said, I started an adolescent clinic at my health center. To see us talk about definitely a safe space is needed, one that is judgment-free, friendly faces, and pleasant attitude. Fernando said we also encourage them to come to health center to access family planning as well. Juliet, yes, I recognize that you would want to share your experience. Let me just finish reading and then you'd have the mic. Someone has their mic on?
She's muted.
Excellent service. We also have Vesta who says, in Anguilla, there is no adolescent clinic. However, the school health nurses, guidance counselor works closely with the health center, referrals done where necessary for antenatal care counseling, drug abuse screening, etc. Good point. Emphasis is really placed more on female clients, and that's something that's really important when we talk about adolescent health, or when we talk about sexual and reproductive health. Oftentimes mentally we equate it to females, but males play a very important role in sexual and reproductive health, and males also go through a lot of changes as well, and there is very little support to males with those changes. And I'll even extend it even further. Our health spaces, our clinics are very female centric in terms of its design. And so oftentimes males, yes, exactly, Vanessa, males tend to shy away. So even at our family planning, at family planning of Trinidad and Tobago, and just today I was telling someone approximately 30% of our clients are males. But that is also linked to the fact that our service offering are predominantly female centric. And most of the services that we offer to males are generally offered to older males. It's prostate cancer screening and all that fun stuff that we know the men love to engage. So it becomes even more difficult when we try to create that equilibrium or that equity. And that's the other thing that I think is also important when we talk about sexual and reproductive health. Are we providing equitable services? Are we providing an equitable opportunity? And that's something that we can explore as well. So who was the person that asked? Juliet, please go ahead and share.
Good night, all. Very good presentation, even though I joined late. I can share my experience. I am a nurse midwife, presently in the administration area within the public mental health system. My experience from years ago, basically, yes, it's a little over, close to 10 years, but as a midwife within the community public service level here in Antigua and Barbuda, this service is offered. Yes, it's a bit limited, but you mainly catch the females coming through when they actually get pregnant and you follow through. And additionally to that, when they're referred via the social worker and that sort of thing, and they're accommodated, the space is not really accommodative to being friendly as such. It's a one-on-one and you walk through, you're pulled into a room and you're given what you needed. There are others that basically, as a midwife, you see the need within the community and you reach out. Some are responsive, receptive, but you have basically this whole secrecy thing about it, that folks basically, more females, the males, you will catch some one-on-one that would be very open and forthright. Nursing, they come into the clinic, wait, no condoms there or whatever the case, and you try to engage, and you do get a lot of response with some of them. But mainly, the service is available in Antigua and Barbuda, but is the accommodation. You only get most of them when they do get pregnant. They're often on 11-year-old before the 15 to 16, and that whole adolescent period thing, sadly. But that is our situation here.
Thank you, Juliet. And
You're welcome.
unfortunately, that's too much of our own stories. And it's also because we're saying to them, don't come. It's also because we're saying that you're not supposed to be here. This is not for you. So when we create a negatively enabled environment, then we're reaping exactly what it is that we're sowing. But I have to say that I'm really happy to see, because as I continued to go through the chat, I see that many of you actually have some sort of program or instances where you are creating an opportunity or an access point for young people to come forward. And that's an important avenue and point. Young people don't like to talk, and it's gotten worse now with texting. So the fact that they are presenting, or the fact that they're coming to you, means that they recognize that you are a safe space. And that's an important place to start. If they recognize you as a safe space and they come to you, it means that they feel safe. And it is not just your responsibility, but it's your passion. We started this whole conversation talking about it's 7 p.m. and you chose to be here. That says that your heart is in the right place. And now we have young people presenting, and we have an opportunity to act. Now, I saw somebody, 2 times they put their hands up and then they put it back down. Do you still want to make your comments? It is, oh gosh, the person put their hands back
Yes,
down.
I do.
Yes, Marie. Please go ahead, Marie.
Yes, so I'm from Jamaica, and in the parish where I work, which is St. James, we have adolescent clinics. We have it in different health centers, and we're targeting young people. And what we do, we have these clinics in the afternoon. So we encourage them to come out like 3 o'clock. We have sessions with them, and you have a discussion. So basically at 3 o'clock, most of the persons who would have visited for antenatal or child health clinic are already out. So they feel like they're in their own little space, and you can have a one-on-one with them, and then they will see their peers. So they tend to interact, and you know exactly what is going on with them. Some of them is they need family planning. Some of them, they just need some counseling. They just need people to tell them how they can go about to get more information. So that is what we're doing now, and we're trying to have more facilities so more persons can be accommodated.
Thank you for sharing, Marie. And that's a really a great initiative, and it's all about the engagement. One of the things that we do at family planning as well, and it's something that I haven't seen much of, I don't know if it is that you're doing it, is the use of technology. Young people, they engage a lot with texting, and that's an important avenue as well. So if it is they cannot present in person, oftentimes many of us work in a public health system where the service is free, but not because you're offering a free service doesn't mean that it's actually free to the person that you're trying to reach. And this isn't limited to young people. There are indirect costs that oftentimes they can't facilitate, whether it is childcare or transportation or time off from school or work, as the case may be. So what we found is that digital health interventions play a very important role in creating access, equitable access. And what you're able to do is provide a safe space for the individual to access information and or a consultation by using a digital health intervention. It could be, and we utilize it in a way where if they don't feel comfortable making a call, they can send a WhatsApp message and one of our clinicians would respond. We utilize it on WhatsApp, we utilize it on Facebook. So we see that digital health interventions is also an avenue. So that is something that you can think about. I see here, Akisha, first and foremost, Caribbean society does not empathize on the need and responsibility for adolescent sexual education. Most parents are not open to discuss things involving sexual relationships, behaviors, and trends. Most of the Caribbean countries, their governments do not invest much in educating the public and children at schools. The availability is not there. There are so many barriers in terms of judgment. And Akisha, you're very right. But that's why we're here this evening, to recognize that we can do something together. So at Family Planning, we have been advocating for comprehensive sexuality education for a very long time. And we will continue to do so until we actually realize it in the way that we think it needs to be realized. And many of my Caribbean brothers and sisters, the member associations in those countries are also doing some of those activities. And you are very correct. A lot of parents are not open to discussing things relating to sexual relationships. A few years ago, Family Planning actually did an activity, a project that looked at CSE. And we did a rapid assessment. And one of the things that we found is the discomfort of parents and or guardians to talk to young people about sexual and reproductive health. And what we did is that we worked with Lexo TV, who does the puppeteers. Most people will know Santana. And we created two Santana focused puppetry productions to be able to talk about it. And one of the things that was highlighted was the recognition that schools are an important place, and I see many of you recognize that schools are an important place to actually have conversations and access point for sexual and reproductive health. But also the home is also an important place, and we need to equip parents with the knowledge and skill sets to engage those conversations. So if you want, you could actually check it out on YouTube. One of it is Curious Leroy, and the other one was Ask Miss. So we used the Santana puppetry to actually create those messages and carry those messages. And you are correct, governments are taking a very conservative road, but it's only so much time that they'll take up that conservative road. As I would have mentioned earlier, we have signed on to the ICPD in 1994, as well as the Montevideo Consensus 2013. And soon come, the bill will become due. Because what happens is that when the governments cannot report with the level of progress, it actually affects their ability to access resources. And we both know the economic reality of our various countries right now. And we do need these avenues to access financial resources to be able to meet our national budgets. So this is one of the reasons why countries sign on to these commitments, because it allows them the opportunity to access these resources. But it means then that they have to put in the work. And we need to hold them accountable. We need to ensure that our data systems are on point. We need to understand who is doing the reporting for our countries and find out what they're reporting. And these are things that you can find out through your civil society organizations. You could find it out through your relevant health authorities. What's the report on and what's the indicators that they're reporting on? And you could actually go up onto the website, the ICPD and the Montevideo Consensus, and you can actually see some of the previous year's reports. So you are very correct, Akisha. And those are some of the areas that we need to collectively address, because we're not going to be able to do it alone. It is a collective. And that's why a forum like this is important. Yes, Lorraine? Lorraine, you have the mic.
Yes, good night. I'm just want to talk about my success story. I am from Nevis, the island of Nevis, with a population of 11,000 people. Well, when I'm a trained public health nurse, trained in Jamaica at the University of Technology in Kingston. When I did my Bachelor of Science degree in Public Health Nursing, 2002 to 2004, and I returned, I came back with many ideas. Some of it is what I had seen done in Jamaica. So I decided to bring back some of what I learned there into my community. So I was the public health nurse manager in my community, where I had a secondary school and a primary school and a preschool. So they had many challenges in the primary school and in the secondary school. But the primary school children took their problems over into the secondary school. So it started in the primary school. So I decided I'm going to initiate a program, which I did was the Adolescent Health Program. But I went into the PTA meetings and I talk about, you know, what I can do to help the teachers with some of these problems that they are having with these children, these sexual problems that they are having, some of the things that can be done. And the parents, they buy into it because they themselves were not educating their children about sexual health. So they were so happy to know that someone else is going to be telling their children about things that they should do in terms of sexual health. So I was able to do a lot of educational session. I did not go into the school. I bring the children by the health center, class by class, during their counseling sessions, and I educated them. The secondary school, the same thing. I built that relationship. So I had a lot of children who would come by and they would ask for me and they will tell me some of their problems. Depending on what it is, I would let them know we have to talk with you. We have to have a talk with your parents. So they would have to come and we all talk about it. I built that relationship with those children that they started calling me mommy. And all now some of them would see me and they would call me mommy. If I'm in town, I would just hear, Nurse mommy, And I would know, well, okay, that's one of my children. Now they have grown, I'm talking about. So I left the health center now and went into another area to work. And I realized that the problem was coming back again, but it is still there anyway. And I started a community family life health education program where we go to the village and we talk to the children. We meet in a certain space by a shop or somewhere and we talk about different topics. And the parents, they too were able to get some kind of education, that they would meet me and they would say, thank you very much. It's only last night I spoke to my son. I spoke to my daughter. I was able to tell Tom, Dick, Harry, Mary, Jane about what you had said. You know, these are some of the things we have to do. We have to go out even into their space, wherever you meet them, in the church, if they're going to be congregating somewhere by a shop, in some community center, somewhere, you reach out to them. Now, I am not at the health centers. I'm still being, the teachers are still asking me to come and talk to the children at the school, to educate them, you know, about their sexual health and all of that. And I still go out and do it. And even with the at-risk adolescents, social services, they would call me and ask me to please come and have a chat, you know, with the children about, the young people about family planning, sexually transmitted infection and all of that. And I always volunteer my time to go because I enjoy doing it.
Thank you so much, Doreen. And what you mentioned, there's an important piece in what you mentioned, and it speaks to meeting people where they are. And that's very important when we talk about access to adolescents' access to sexual and reproductive health, is understanding their own spaces and being able to work within the spaces that they feel confident. Sexual and reproductive health, even for us as adults, the uptake of sexual and reproductive health services for us as adults could be very difficult. It could be very uncomfortable to talk about. So imagine a young person, an adolescent who isn't sure what's happening, who haven't yet, as some of you mentioned earlier, they're still developing, they're still learning, they're still growing, and being able to communicate or verbalize some of these areas, it could be a little bit more than stressful. So that is why creating the safe space and the enabling environment is so important when we talk about creating access. And one of the things that we should also point out as well, and I see here Genevieve, I think I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Genevieve mentioned teachers should be more open to discuss family life education, or it should be a part of the curriculum. And you're very correct. And this is actually something that's being said time and time again, like a broken record. However, it's a proverbial unicorn, because it's not the politically, it's not the safe political move to make, because of the discomforts around sexual and reproductive health and comprehensive sexuality education. Now, part of the issue is that as adults, we also come with our own baggages. We have our own trauma. And unfortunately, in the Caribbean, sexual and reproductive health baggage and trauma is quite high. We have a number of mummies, daddies who are also teachers and healthcare providers who are walking around, who've had trauma from sexual violence, who continue to live in domestic violence situations, who continue to have other types of trauma that affects their ability to objectively engage in being able to impart comprehensive sexuality education. And this was something that we actually found out in that same project that I told you about that we did a few years ago. So there is a level of discomfort among teachers and even healthcare providers, because it's a very risky road, because they too are dealing with their own trauma. They too are dealing with their own insecurities. And if it is, I'm not in my own place of confidence, then how can I then be the one carrying the baton to carry this information? So that is also one of the challenges that we see. So teachers as well need to be equipped, and even healthcare providers. Not because you're a healthcare providers mean that you know how to talk to young people. It is a specific skill set. It is, you have to know how to engage a young person. You have to be able to break down the information in a comfortable way. You have to be able to engage them in a way that where they feel as if it's a safe space to share. So on that note, I am very mindful of the time. And I would use this opportunity to summarize based on what you've shared from our last conversation as some of the ways that we can move forward to improve our access. And one recommendation, even coming out from our conversation, is definitely increasing young people's access to comprehensive sexuality education. And many of you are doing that. So I encourage you to keep at it, because it is very much needed, increasing young people's access to CSE, creating youth-friendly, safe spaces to facilitate young people's access to contraceptive options, including emergency contraception and other sexual and reproductive health services. And safe spaces isn't just limited to static spaces or physical spaces. You can utilize virtual spaces where you are able to create an environment where young people feel safe to share and exchange information. Now, there is something as well that we didn't touch on earlier today, but it's actually something that we've been advocating for a while. And that is the use of the GILEC competency model to assess adolescents' need to services so that no one is denied access. So what the GILEC competency model looks at, when we talk about adolescent, we talk about that period of growth and transition. And when we talk about that period, we recognize that there are many young people who, as part of their development, are competent enough to understand the decisions that they're making. And that's the premise of the GILEC competency model. What it does is that it is a sort of a means test that you do with the young person, so that as a healthcare provider, you understand, or you know that this young person understands the decision that they're making. And once they are in that confident place of decision making, you can move forward with providing that young person with access to sexual and reproductive health services. So that's actually one of the models that we've been advocating for. Another recommendation is to promote systemic advocacy on adolescent sexual and reproductive health issues, and this forum is evidence of that. So I am very honored that we're this evening, that this is what we're talking about, and I look forward to seeing how we can realize some work out of this particular webinar. And I leave an open commitment that the family planning stands ready to continue to work with you to realize equitable access and meaningful access for adolescent sexual and reproductive health services. Another one is the role of gender and sexual and reproductive health. We need to consider stronger programs where we include males and females. We need to scale up our youth clinics where it becomes a norm and not a novelty. So, you know, it needs to be something that they're able to access, right? So that's also one. And lastly, one last thing that I want to leave you with is legislation. We need to advocate for those changes in legislation that will provide us with the systems in order for us to operate. And I know that that's a big one for you in particular, because many of you, most of you, operate in the public health system and you are restrained by policy and legislation. So it's advocating for those changes that ensures the health and well-being of those that we serve. And when we look at our patient charter, that's our ultimate goal, right? Good health and well-being. Well, in order to create good health and well-being, we need to ensure that the systems are in place to facilitate good health and well-being. So those are just some of the major points in summary of some of the recommendations that we can look at as we look at improving access to sexual and reproductive health services. I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for having me this evening. I know I went over by a few minutes and I do apologize. I hope I didn't throw you off too much. If there are any questions or concerns, I remain reachable. And as I mentioned, As well, family planning remains committed to working with you and to being a continued partner with the Caribbean Regional Midwives Association. Thank you very much for having me. And if there are any questions that we're able to take, by all means, this is not the end of our consultation. You all could put them in an email, shoot them to me. Just make sure you're sending it to the right email, Marcia, and then we could move forward from there. So I hand it over back to you, Marcia, and my lovely moderator.
Thank you very much, Eva. Thank you for that wonderful, wonderful presentation. And I'm just seeing in the chat all the comments. Excellent presentation. Well done. Wonderful presentation. I mean, it was really, really very, very informative and very interesting and interactive. You know, you were worried, you know, how the time would go, like the time just flew away, and you know, it was really, really, really interactive. We want to thank you for your presentation. And to do a proper thank you to you, I call on Diana. Henry Ernest.
Thank you, Marcia. Lorraine, on behalf of CRMA, I take this opportunity to thank you so much for sharing with us and making our presentation one of a difference, where persons were able to share and also learn from your expertise. We do hope that you can come again at our request at another time to have such an engaging exercise with us again. Once again, thank you so very much. We are so appreciative of your, in fact, the way that you went about with the presentation tonight, engaging, very interactive. We are thankful for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana. So thank you again, Eva. And I hope you realize that once you have made contact with the Caribbean Regional Midwives Association, we call upon you because we service all the Caribbean. So you know, it was so interesting, and I think there was something in it for everyone. Everyone could have related to what you had to say about the adolescent and their access to sexual and reproductive health, and putting things in place to make sure that they do access the services that they so desperately need. So we want to so much. I want to remind persons that you can look in the chat and you would see the link for the Google form. So please fill out the Google form. It's in the chat. And for those persons who want the CMEs, etc., you need to fill the form. And once you complete the form and send it in, we will get your certificate to you virtually, of course. We'll give you the link to get it. So please fill the form. Don't forget. And again, we want to thank you from all 342 persons on. We want to thank you very much, Eva, for your time.
You are most welcome, and it was indeed my honor to be here this afternoon. And I welcome the familial ties. By all means, you have my number, and as I mentioned to you, don't hesitate to send me a message or give me a call.
Careful how you saying that around midwives, yes.
Man, look here. Look here. Look here.
Yes.
Woo,
yes,
yeah.
and just like you, we also have the Americas and Latin America Caribbean region. So we do have member associations across the Caribbean who are also very versed in their own sphere, in their own areas. So I'd be happy, depending on what topics you are, to also make recommendations. I think I would have mentioned to you, Marcia, one of the persons I really wanted to co-facilitate with me this afternoon is a gentleman by the name of Kobe. Kobe is 24 years old, and he's a lawyer. And when you hear this young man and his experience and expertise in the law and sexual and reproductive health, it's amazing. He served on the Guyana Planned Parenthood as well, on the board. So there is a lot of great resources across the Caribbean region, and I'll be happy to continue this relationship with you all. I think we need to network and partner more. We cannot do this alone. And this is one of the reasons why I said yes. So I mean, I wasn't sure how I was going to do it because I live very far from my office, and our office closes at 6. So I was just racing up the road and hoping to reach up in time to be able to do it. But that's why I said, yes, it's through networks and partnerships that we make that meaningful change. So I'm very happy that to have done this with you, and I look forward to our continued work together. Thank you for having me.
You're most
Thank
welcome.
you very much.
Thank you for coming, for being here. Shirley, any parting words?
No, just to reiterate that it was a wonderful presentation, interactive, informative, all of the adjectives that came up in the chat, and more, right? So we thank you very much, Ava. We thank the 344 persons that took the time out and that found this topic interesting enough to come out and to stay on. We still have 317 on. I like to do roll call at the end. So we had Dominica, we had British Virgin Islands, we had St. Lucia, Guyana, we had the Bahamas, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Belize, Dominica, I said Dominica already, Antigua, Cayman, St. Kitts and Nevis, Turks and Caicos, and Anguilla. Now, if you did not hear your name, your country, thank you very much, Barbados. Thank you very much, Grenada. See, the numbers are now increasing. So we, the Caribbean was well represented on this particular call. And so on this particular webinar. So we thank you all, please. Now, you know, it's 400, almost 350 of you. So please give the secretary time to get your certificates back out to you. We normally give it at least 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, because we have other projects going on. So give her 2 to 3 weeks to get your certificates out to you, but you must fill out the Google form in order to get it. All right, so thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you all, and thank you again, Eva.